Everybody just take a deep breath. Relax. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another game preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems, and general Premier League chat ahead of Gameweek 2. So, one game week down, everyone just needs to relax a little bit. Just one game week. The data doesn't tell us anything right now. All of our plans, best laid plans that we made in the summer still stand. We still don't know how all of these squads are going to look in a couple of weeks when the transfer window shuts. We've got a nice little buffer, a nice little breather after game week 3, where we've got 2 weeks off, international break. Transfer window will shut in that time period as well. So we'll be able to head into game week 4 with a lot more knowledge and a lot more certainty over how everything is kind of shaping up. I'll discuss what I think are some of the main talking points, some of the main areas of friction that have come out of Game Week 1 in a few minutes' time. But if I can just implore you, if you went into Game Week 1 fairly happy with certain players, fairly happy with how your squad was looking, and one or two of those players either didn't start or didn't do well in Game Week 1, just look ahead to Game Week 3 as the moment when you can make that decision about whether to dump them or not, okay? I know it's really difficult. This is Draft FPL. All of you listening will have totally unique teams. That's the beauty of this game. So there may well be certain players that you should be dumping right now, and we'll cover some of those towards the end. But the majority of you, I think, just hold some restraint. So I'm obviously recording late in the week. It's Thursday morning, so waivers will be processed in about 9 hours' time at the moment of recording. So by the time you listen to this, it'll be just probably 5 or 6 hours away. Next week, it is just a normal Saturday, Sunday game week. So we'll have a Friday deadline. We'll have a little bit more time to think about things. And obviously, we've got that gap, as I said. So any team news, injury developments, press conference info are all up to date as of now. But of course, subject to change. Because of time, I've got a lot to cover. I'm going to try and do it at a fairly surface level, just to kind of cover the players and cover the points that I want to. So it may not be quite as in-depth as it usually is, but needs must this week. So let's get straight into it. So fixture-wise this week, there are a few standouts. I do like Chelsea away at West Ham. I think after that disappointing home performance against Palace, I think they could really go and, really put West Ham to the sword there. City at home to Spurs. I think the age of Spurs being the City bogey team is pretty much over now that Son has left. Do expect Spurs to line up pretty much how they did against PSG, and we'll have to see how that pans out. Bournemouth at home to Wolves, I think should be pretty good. Burnley and Sunderland is a cracking one, and after the way Sunderland performed against West Ham in Game Week 1, definitely some of those guys are on the menu. Arsenal at home to Leeds, that is a no-brainer. The one that really stands out, which I hadn't really clocked before, was Newcastle against Liverpool on Monday night. I do wonder whether whether all that drama has been sort of bottled up, because the last thing Newcastle wanted was to sell him a week or two ago and then have him turn up at St James's Park under the lights, national televised game, have him go and score the winner against them and just completely put a downer on their season. Whereas now they can go into that game, I think they can make it hard for Liverpool. They can try and grind out a result. And if they come away from that with any kind of positive result, whether that's even, a draw, they could then go into the week after, go towards the back end of the transfer window and actually feel confident that they've got enough there to sell Isak, still be competitive, and still have a little bit of time to bring in another forward, whoever that may be. So I wonder if that's partly what's causing a bit of the delay. Anyway, a couple of injuries and suspensions. Konsa sent off. He'll be suspended going into this week. Havertz has got some sort of a knee injury, which has sparked Arsenal pivoting to Eze and taking him in the transfer window. So not heard any detail on this knee injury, but if it's causing them to go out and spend £60 million on a replacement player doesn't sound great. And then Branthwaite for Everton, we had confirmation last week. He has got a hamstring injury, but again, I've got no detail as to how long he's likely to be out for. So if you've got him, given the fact that Everton couldn't even keep a clean sheet against Leeds, I think he's a reasonably safe drop. So a new slide I'm going to incorporate into the game week previews because, to be honest, I've been searching for ways around this since I've been doing this pod, really, which is trying to expand this a little bit beyond just telling you about the players who have got 10% ownership that you're likely to pick up in your waiver piles, because it doesn't take into account those of you in slightly smaller leagues, and it doesn't take into account sort of blockbuster trades that might be going on in your leagues, and just sort of, trying to get a bit more coverage over what's going on. So we'll see how this goes moving forward, but this is something I'm going to trial for 2 or 3 weeks and see whether it works. So the Solanke versus Richarlison is a big talking point from Gameweek 1. Solanke is nowhere near fit. He didn't look fit when he came on against PSG. He didn't look fit when he came on towards the end of that game against Burnley. I fully expect Richarlison to start because I'm fully expecting Spurs, as I just said, to start in a similar setup to what they did against PSG in a kind of 3-5-2. So it'd be Richarlison and Kudus as a front two, kind of a split forwards or even a vertical forwards. So I don't think Solanke will start. If I'm looking over the season, Solanke is still the starting number 9. Richarlison is a great option to have to rotate and come off the bench when he's fit, but we know he can't really be relied on for any length of time, and it's only a matter of time before he picks up a knock. And as I said, I think, if you were to look back in game week 38, Solanke will be the main man, unless, of course, he has his own injury doubts. Sunderland, as Kieran and I were discussing in our creator team preview, which actually was quite underwatched. So if you still haven't watched that, I think I stand by a lot of the stuff that was said in that, even after game week 1. If you didn't see it, basically, we're both pretty high on Sunderland. We both thought, or I certainly think that Sunderland will not be relegated and will finish higher than all of the other newly promoted teams. Leeds obviously got a positive result on Monday, and I was impressed by Leeds, but I thought that was as much of a disappointing performance from Everton as much as it was from Leeds. And even though they racked up the XG, because Everton just seemed fairly happy with Leeds shooting on site, I'm still worried about where the goals are going to come from. And obviously, if it wasn't for that penalty, which I do think was a penalty, by the way, but it's a bit of an annoying one to give away. If it wasn't for that, then obviously it would have finished 0-0. So I'm still worried about where the goals are going to come from Leeds. If Leeds can go out and sign a goal scorer between now and the end of the window, given the way their midfield looked, then I would also back them to stay up. But no, Sunderland, definitely some potential there. And with their trip to Burnley, if they can get 3 points against Burnley, that is such a head start for them. 6 points from 6. And the odds of them going down would absolutely tumble. So still pretty high on Sunderland. Pep Roulette, we did say again in the Man City preview that I think Pep Roulette is going to be back spinning quicker than ever this season. We saw a couple of surprises, potentially. Oscar Bob started up top. We saw Gonzalez come into midfield, and we saw Rico Lewis start at right back. And we also saw John Stones start at centre back, which possibly shouldn't be a surprise. He's he's definitely in their top 2 centre-backs in the club. I'd arguably say on his day, he's better than any of them. It's just how many days does he get? So we'll see how they line up against Spurs. Expect changes again. I don't think they'll line up with that exact 11, because the setup that they're going to face is going to be different. But keep an eye on my predicted lineup for that. Palace are very organised. I was impressed with how organised they looked against Chelsea. I thought they were good value for a draw. 0-0 was possibly not the fairest result. I think there were chances for both teams, but they looked really, really solid, and I'm more than happy to invest in their defence moving forward. I've got, didn't Man U do so well? Everyone just purring at how well Man United did to scrape a 1-0 defeat at home on the opening day. I'm not going to fully mimic Roy Keane's post-match rant in that game, but I was watching that. Now, it's difficult because you always watch games, particularly the early ones, you're watching them through the lenses of your pre-season biases and the pre-season opinions that you have on teams and certain players. So I was watching that game just thinking, Mbeumo and Cunha getting into loads of half-decent positions, taking lots of half-decent shooting opportunities, racking up the XG as a result. But actually, was there any single chance that that they really should have scored? Probably not. Now, Sesko getting added into the mix certainly could change that, because there'll be more of an outlet. Cunha obviously started that game as the number 9, which I don't think we'll see that often this season. But yeah, I think my opinion on both Cunha and Mbeumo and them not being able to get anywhere near the tally they got last year is still holding firm in my mind. Arsenal and City fullbacks. I mean, I kind of just touched on Rico Lewis starting for City. Arsenal started with White and Calafiori, which is not a pairing we saw very often last season, because we were seeing a lot of Timber and Skelly. Looked fairly solid. Say United were arguably the better team in terms of possession, territory, etc. But there is something particularly solid about having Ben White in there for Arsenal, and I think he's underrated as a forward, as an attacking outlet as well when they do have the ball further up. Calafiori's a funny player. I don't really know quite what he's meant to do yet, but again, I just feel they just look a lot more solid with Calafiori there over Lewis Skelly, who I think still got a few rash moments in his game, which is not his fault. There are lots of much more senior and experienced players than him in the Premier League that have their own rash moments in him, so it's not necessarily a massive knock to him, but he's still so young. And I think I said either in the Arsenal preview or back end of last season, he was just relied on a bit too much, I think, last year, and he needs to be protected. He needs to be rotated a little bit, let him find his feet. He's shown that he can do it, but I think just expecting him to start 38 league games and be the main left back could just set him up for a fall. Leeds, I say, very impressive. I was really impressed with their midfield. The player that stood out in particular was Ampadu. Not because I thought he was the best player, but because I just thought he looked really, really mature, really solid, and just really comfortable there. Looked like he could play in a lot of solid Premier League midfields as a sitting number 6. As I say, it was a fairly comfortable ride. Everton were hardly giving him the run around there, and I think against midfielders with a little bit more legs, a little bit more passing, he may struggle a bit. Stats was the other one, but I think I was expecting him to look pretty good. But he also was really impressive too, and Tanaka as well. It was a really, really solid 3. So yeah, I'm confident Leeds are not going to ship tons of goals, but it's still just how many they're going to be able to get themselves. Everton, awful. We saw Grealish not start that game, came off the bench. McNeil also didn't start that game, did he? It was Njayi, Dewsbury Hall, and Charlie Alcaraz. I say, if you've been listening to the pod for a couple of years, I think McNeil is really, really underrated. If McNeil doesn't start this weekend, barely gets looking off the bench, I would not be surprised to see him get a loan or a transfer away to another lower Premier League club who could make use of his skills. And then finally, I've just put knee-jerk FC. There's been so much stuff out in the Own Draft FC Discord channel, on Reddit, on social media. Lots of talk about managers wanting to drop some big, big names because they didn't start, didn't feature, didn't look well in Gameweek 1. So I'm not going to hammer the point again. Just don't be knee-jerk FC. Just relax. I say, these players are good players. You pick them for a reason. Just take stock in a week or two. Okay. So let's get into the main picks for Game Week 2. Starting with some defenders. Ben White says roster percentage is 84%, which is of course high, but last couple of seasons coming out of draft day, it was pushing 100%, which means there will be a handful of leagues out there that have Ben White available. And for the chance now of picking up a regular Arsenal defender, I think it's definitely worth a punt. If you pick him up now and he starts on Saturday and starts in Game Week 3, then we have to assume he is the main starting right back moving forward. And then you've got yourself an absolute gem out of the waivers that you could hang on to all season long. Same with Calafiori, though I think he will be rotated more than White. The ownership is lower to account for that. I don't really see why Arsenal would change their lineup. So even if you looked at Calafiori or White as a really short-term punt at home to Leeds, I think they're a really safe option for a clean sheet. So I'd happily pick either one of them up. John Stones, as mentioned, he's owned in less than 50% of 18 leagues. And so a nice home game against what I think will be a reasonably defensive-looking Spurs on Saturday. And for the potential, if he does stay fit, I don't see why he drops out of the team. He's a class act. Chalobah for Chelsea, again, just 50% owned and could be a very regular starting player for Chelsea. So not just a short-term pickup, could be a bit of a long-term one too. Lecraft for Palace, as I said, they look really, really solid. Decent number of him available in waiver piles, and a home game against Forest, which is obviously going to have a little bit of spice to it because of the Europa League, Europa Conference League shenanigans, which Forest certainly played their part in stirring the pot there. So Palace are going to be bang up for that game. I mean, I don't know how much more motivated you can get for sort of two mid-table teams, which in any other season would be just one of those fixtures that you don't really look at twice. But this one could be one of the games of the weekend, similar to Newcastle, Liverpool, given all the background waiver stuff that's going on. And then De Kuiper for Brighton started at the weekend. He's owned in 50%, which means he's there for half of you. And they have got a trip to Everton's first game at the whatever it's called, WD-40 Stadium. So given how Everton performed, I am really not confident they can kick things off with a win there. I think Brighton, as much as they'll be disappointing that they came away with a draw against Fulham with that very, very late equaliser, I think they'll be going there confident that they can keep Everton out and can win that game. So yeah, and with his attacking upside that we mentioned, could be a decent one just to have for a week or two, see how he goes. Into midfielders, Reinders. He's the biggest name, probably getting banded around. Owned in 78% of 18 leagues. So he's there for about a quarter of you listening, depending on your league size. And I'll put a star next to his name. I think if he's there, and if you've got anywhere near the top of the waiver priority, he has to be somebody that you're trying to bring in. He looked really good. There's always that clutch of players that get all the hype before Gameweek 1, and inevitably they're not all going to get it. And as much as I've just been saying, don't be knee-jerk FC, I think in this case, there's little to lose by picking him up now and a hell of a lot to gain if he carries on in the vein that he did at the weekend. Box-to-box, all-action midfielder, clearly has an eye for goal. I don't think there's really anyone that can rival him in the team. He's got just more of an engine than sort of Gundogan does now. So I think he's firmly out of the equation. Even Bernardo Silva, who I think has been quietly on the decline for a year or so now, I think Reinders gives you something over him. And then if you're looking for just a bit more stability without playing lights of Foden, Marmoush, Shirky, and all of those guys, yeah, I think he could be a really, really big player for City this season. And aside from Rodri and Haaland, could be one of the first names on the team sheet and one that does get a lot of minutes. So definitely one to be picking up. Esteval for Chelsea is 50-50 owned. He looked really good again. Looked like a live wire when he came off the bench. Still looks a little bit raw. He's got a little bit of just really keen to impress. I think he just needs to calm down a little bit. He's clearly got the skill there. Whether we're going to see him get a start soon, I don't know, but he's certainly knocking on the door. I wasn't particularly impressed with Gittins. He just looked a little quieter in that game. But again, it's only been one game week, so I'm not going to totally write Gittins off. But yeah, I've got a feeling Esteval is not far away from getting a starting spot. The other option is that they drop Gittins, move João Pedro back, and start Delap. I thought, and again, a little bit biased with our preseason content, I just thought Chelsea looked a lot more solid in attack with Delap as the focal point. Jorginho Rutter for Brighton, who I like and I still like. I think he's definitely worth a pick up, particularly with that match away at Everton coming up. They've just sold the player whose name I can never pronounce properly, Encizio, to the Blue Man Group for some amount of money. So he's gone, which means in terms of number 10 options, it's pretty much Jorginho, O'Reilly, and Gruder, although Gruder's, I sort of class Gruder more as a winger, to be honest, although he can play across that front three. So it just moves everyone's surety of starting in that Brighton lineup a little bit higher. We obviously saw Jorginho start as the 9 over Welbeck, which again just nudges him slightly up the ranks in terms of like percentage points of how likely he is to start week in, week out. O'Reilly, I thought was off. I don't think that's looking likely given that he started and took the penalty in that game. We might mention him in a couple of minutes' time. So yeah, big fan. Anderson, still pretty low owned and good point scoring there. Zubimendi for Arsenal, I think, could do well against Leeds, where they've got a little bit more of the ball. Did well on the defensive actions in their first match. And then Ndoye is only owned in 11% of leagues. There's a mistake on the screen there. Obviously, Forest are going to Palace this weekend. But I do like him. He looked pretty good. And I think if you're in sort of a 10-plus team league, probably ought to be on someone's roster. And then, it looks like there's accidentally been a few extra stars put around the last player's name here. Dango Uatara. Not really spoken about him much on the pod before. Player I do quite like the look of. Big money move to Brentford from Bournemouth. Their record transfer fee, so you'd expect him to get good minutes there. And yeah, just I don't think I've really mentioned him before on the pod, but it's a player I quite like the look of. Into attack, Richarlison, he's there. I think if you're in the bigger leagues and Richarlison's floating around, then I would definitely pick him up. Or even if you're just looking for Gameweek 2 and Gameweek 3, Spurs got a home game against Bournemouth in Gameweek 3, so happily have him for 2 or 3 weeks. Thiago for Brentford was high on in the draft rankings because I said he'd be a starting centre forward, which he is, and took the penalty, so he's got a goal straight off the mark. Brentford, though, so they were looking poor in that game, so we'll have to see how that squad ends up fleshing out as to whether or not he's going to be a real top option down the stretch. And then Mayenda for Sunderland, very low ownership, started at the weekend, scored, game away at Burnley, decent chance to get on the score sheet again. And for the majority of leads, he will fall somewhere in the top 24 forwards because he's playing. Some hidden gem picks. So for those who are reasonably new to the pod, hidden gems are players with less than 10% ownership in average size leagues. That means that I can safely say for 90+% of you out there listening, these players will be available. So let's have a look. In defence, loads of options. Ballard obviously sits at the top of the points tally at the moment. Scored, bonus, defence, the whole lot. Owned in 1% of leagues currently, which I think going into Gameweek 1 was very, very reasonable. This is one of those where I will allow you to knee-jerk a little bit because of the fixture. And there's always that one player every year who just goes mad for the first 2 or 3 game weeks. And just wonder if Ballard is that player. So yeah, I'd happily take him for Gameweek 2, even if you're just looking at it as a 1-week punt. Richards is an easy way into the Palace defence. For Villa going away to Brentford, you've got Mings, also Pau Torres, who should start over Konsa, who's suspended. If you want to target the opposite side of the Burnley-Sunderland fixture, then Esteve is just 6% owned and also good value for defensive contributions as well. And then finally, if you want a bit of Bournemouth at home to Wolves, then Senese and new centre-back Diakite, who went straight into the lineup as predicted, both very, very low ownership. They looked a bit all over the place against Liverpool, but it's hard to judge defence. Game 1, opening fixture of the season against that Liverpool attack. I think a lot of defences and a lot of defenders will look a little bit all over the place. Wolves looked pretty poor against City, but I'm not going to judge them just yet. As I was fairly high on them in pre-season, or higher than most people are. A lot of people are touting them to go down. They didn't start with what I think is their first choice 11 because possibly it's just a little early in the preparation for some of their players. So I think in this fixture we might see the likes of John Arias and Lopez starting, which I think will give them a little bit more upfront support. Strand Larson. Midfielder-wise, definitely a few options if you're just looking for a relatively boring 3 or 4 points for a central defensive midfielder. Gravenberch for Liverpool will come back in this game against Newcastle. Polina for Spurs should have plenty of mopping up to do against Manchester City. And Statch for Leeds and against Arsenal should also have his work cut out. If you want a little bit more upside, Tavernier, interestingly, got a hell of a lot of defensive contributions, though that was against Liverpool. So we'll have to see how that pans out against Wolves. But he's, of course, a fairly efficient draft asset in terms of his attacking output as well. So he could be a best of both worlds. Oscar Bob I've put on there with a diamond next to his name because I think he could be one who, similarly to like White, who I was talking about earlier, Could be a great one to pick up on a short-term basis with a longer-term view as well. Again, what are you going to lose? If he starts and scores, then he's just putting another nail in his place, in the plans. If he doesn't start and doesn't even come off the bench, and it looks like he's just going to be another one of their rotation options, then you can drop him the week after. No harm done. But the potential there is huge. We saw it before he got injured last year, and he looked really lively against away at Wolves last week. So, yeah, I put a diamond next to his name. The other one who I've got a diamond next to is O'Reilly, because, again, if he becomes a bit of a mainstay in that Brighton 11, I think he could be another really efficient performer. And if he's on penalties as well, then another nice little bonus. The final hidden gem is Nemecha for Leeds, who I didn't realise was basically English. He's got German parents and then lived in England for sort of most of his life, but he's represented the I think like the German youth ranks at under 21, etc. So yeah, I just assumed he was a German fella, but I heard him do his post-match interview and he very much got an English accent. Obviously came off the bench to replace Pirro, scored the penalty, took it pretty well, looked okay when they came on against Everton. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. I thought Pirro didn't really offer a huge amount. He looked like he just gave them a bit more physicality and a bit more of an outlet when he came on. I would not be surprised if he starts away at Arsenal. Given the way that game's going to pan out, they will want the ball to stick a little bit more when they do clear their lines. So, yeah, he could end up being the main sort of forward that becomes a big option this year that was totally off our radars in pre-season. So there's a lot of talk about Joe Burrow not being up to it. I wasn't really aware of Nemecha or what his kind of skill set was, to be honest. I kind of just assumed he'd be second or third string forward to whoever else they bring in. I wonder if they're actually looking at him and thinking he could be the main man this season. So we'll have to see. As I said many times, and I'll say again one more time, I think Leeds need to bring in another proper centre forward. And if you've been watching this episode thinking, oh God, Mitch has totally forgotten about Leeds getting Calvert-Lewin. No, I haven't forgotten that. So if you're looking to make room, a few players that you might want to get rid of for varying reasons, Ederson and Onana, not really sure where their places are in the squad. Same with Areola. We saw Hermansen come straight in. In defence, Konsa, Ake, Robinson and Kirill all got decent ownership and can probably be replaced for playing options this week. And then further forward, Murphy for Newcastle did not start in that opening game week, so I think he's definitely a rotation option. Gittins, Marlon, Paqueta, Trossard and McNeil, I think are all falling into that category of being in and out of the waiver pile. So if you're looking at someone in the pile that you prefer the look of for this week and next week, I'd not be against dropping those guys. And then Havertz, with that knee injury that we're still waiting for confirmation on, does sound like it could be pretty bad. 98% owned. And if you are looking for, if there is a forward in the pile that you want to bring in, he could be one to make way. Predicted lineups. First pass was done at the weekend. I'll look at some of the news coming in today and get another pass through of those lineups before the waivers process later this evening. But even if you're not a member, you can see those lineups on the main Draft FC page, or if you just Google Draft FC predicted lineups, you'll find them very, very easily. So that will do. I am aware that, I've skimmed over lots of those players very quickly. Anything a little bit more particular you want, then comment below. I'll make sure to have a little pass of the comments around 5 o'clock UK time, which is about an hour and a half before the waivers will process. If you're looking for a bit more support, something else to help you along the road this season, if you're taking draft a little bit more seriously, then head over to draftfc.co.uk and have a look at what we've got on offer there. You get the live game week functionality, waiver stats that you won't be able to find anywhere else, and global rank, which ranks your league against all the other leagues in the world, league analytics, all sorts of stuff in there, which I'm sure you'll want to stick around with. Now we're out of preseason mode. If you want to sign up, just $3.99 a month, which, given what you can and can't get for $3.99 these days, is not a huge amount of money. I think we've frozen our prices for this will be the third season now. So yeah, I think it's good value for money. And you get into the Discord channel too. That's the other thing, which I think is worth its weight in gold. So yeah, draftfc.co.uk, go and check us out. If you like the content, give us a thumbs up, click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. If you've been listening on the audio, then make sure you're following on whichever platform you listen to. So again, you get notified when the new episodes drop. Say this coming week, we've got Bank Holiday Monday. Depending on timing, it might be an early gaming preview, which I don't love because there's often a lot of news comes out in the midweek and there could be lots of transfer news. So there's a chance we get an early gaming preview on Monday, even possibly before or during that Newcastle-Liverpool game. So yeah, so make sure you subscribe to wherever you get this and you won't miss it. Yeah, best of luck with your moves, best of luck with your matchups and your teams this week. And until next time, stay sure.